In July 2025, Japan made a decision that shocked the financial world. They pledged $550 billion directly into the American economy. In return, Trump gave them a 15% tariff rate. Steel and aluminum were excluded entirely, still sitting at 50%. Canada, meanwhile, pledged zero. No investment fund, no tribute, no check. And Canada got steel tariffs cut from 50 to 25%. Auto tariffs slashed from 25 to 15%. Dairy fully protected. The entire $20 billion tariff threat completely blocked. Same president, same negotiating table. Zero versus $550 billion. The question every economist is asking: what exactly did Canada have that Japan didn't? Japan's strategy was transactional. They arrived with a checkbook. Canada's strategy was structural. They arrived with something more irreplaceable. Canada supplies 62% of all U.S. crude oil imports. That is not a small number. That is not a negotiating footnote. Midwest refineries run on 70% Canadian crude. Right now, these refineries were physically built to process heavy Canadian oil. They cannot simply switch to lighter American shale crude overnight. The IEA confirmed Midwest refineries lack alternative infrastructure entirely. Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, all dependent on Canadian supply. Any disruption lands immediately at local gas stations across swing states. That is not abstract geopolitical theory. That is gasoline price reality. 1/3 of uranium purchased by U.S. nuclear reactors came from Canada in 2024. Total U.S. nuclear generation was 782 terawatt-hours that same year. That is more electricity than Canada generates from all fuels combined. America's nuclear fleet is quietly structurally dependent on Canadian uranium. Then there is potash. Canada controls roughly 31% of global potash reserves. American farmers use potash as a critical fertilizer for corn, soybeans, wheat. Saskatchewan alone sits on reserves that cannot be easily replaced globally. And aluminum. Canada is America's largest single foreign supplier of aluminum. When Trump tariffed Canadian aluminum in 2025, U.S. aluminum prices spiked immediately. American manufacturers started feeling the cost pressure within weeks. This is not punishing Canada in isolation. It is punishing integrated supply chains. And that integration is the core reason Canada had leverage that $550 billion could not buy. Saskatchewan sits on 1.1 billion tons of recoverable potash reserves, the world's largest. Russia has 920 million tons. Belarus has 750 million tons. Nobody else is close. In 2024, the United States imported approximately 12 million tons of potash from Canada. More than 80% of the potash used in American agriculture comes from Saskatchewan. The CEO of Nutrien said it plainly. Cost of this will be borne by U.S. farmers. U.S. farmers will likely feel the impact after the spring planting season. Corn, soybeans, wheat, the backbone of American agricultural exports, all need potash. This is the strategic architecture that Canada brought to that table, not a checkbook. A resource map that Washington cannot redraw overnight. Now contrast this with what Japan brought. Japan's economy is heavily export-dependent. Around 18% of GDP comes from exports. Its top export to America is automobiles and automotive parts. Roughly 10% of Japan's entire labor force is connected to the auto industry. Trump knew exactly how much pain he could inflict with auto tariffs, and Japan knew it too. That asymmetry defined the entire negotiation. Tokyo needed tariff relief on autos more than Washington needed anything from Japan. So Japan arrived with what it had: capital investment commitments. The $550 billion was structured as loans and guarantees through Japanese government institutions. The St. Louis Federal Reserve analyzed this arrangement with considerable skepticism afterward. Their researchers described it as functioning more like a risky, low-cost loan to America. Japan's public sector would liquidate assets, absorb opportunity costs, fund U.S. investments. All of this to buy tariff relief that still left steel and aluminum at 50%. Think about that for a moment. $550 billion spent, and the metals tariff stayed. Japan also committed to $8 billion annually in U.S. agricultural purchases, $7 billion annually in U.S. energy purchases, U.S. aircraft, defense equipment. The American Automotive Policy Council, representing GM, Ford, and Stellantis, openly criticized the deal. They said it disadvantaged North American-built vehicles relative to Japanese imports at 15%. Washington had effectively given Japan better auto tariff treatment than Canada and Mexico. That is the deal, $550 billion bought. Canada, with $0 on the table, was simultaneously getting auto tariffs halved. Steel and aluminum tariffs cut from 50 to 25%. Dairy protected. $20 billion in new tariffs blocked. Less than 2 hours before those tariffs activated on August 19, 2026, Trump blinked. He postponed the entire package. Not because Canada paid, because Canada held. Canada's deal tells a completely different story. Canada gave back American bourbon on shelves. 8 Canadian provinces had restricted or banned American liquor as retaliation. Canada asked provinces to reverse that as part of the emerging agreement. But now look at what Canada received in exchange. Steel tariffs cut from 50 to 25%. That is a 25 percentage point reduction. Auto tariffs cut from 25 to 15%. Dairy supply management fully protected. The issue Trump had screamed about for months. And the entire $20 billion Section 338 tariff bomb completely blocked from activating. So Canada gave back American bourbon and got steel, autos, and dairy in return. Vance called Canada climbing down. Every trade economist reading those terms disagrees. Japan's $550 billion bought zero relief on Section 232, steel and aluminum. Those metals remain at 50%. That was confirmed explicitly in the framework deal. Japan's negotiators pushed hard for metal tariff inclusion. It was not achieved. Canada secured the steel and aluminum cut that Japan could not buy for $550 billion. And one more thing. Canada did not sign away future potash allocations. It did not pledge uranium supply contracts. Energy integration remained a Canadian decision, not an American entitlement under the deal. Trump's own executive orders already exempted energy, potash, and critical minerals from tariffs. Washington made that exemption not as a favor to Canada, but because it had no choice. Any tariff on Canadian potash would land immediately on American corn and soybean farmers in swing states before midterm elections. That is not a lever Washington will easily pull. The broader lesson is not about Canada versus Japan as countries. It is about the architecture of leverage itself in a world where tariffs are now permanent weapons. Financial capital flows. Resources do not flow. They are geologically fixed and politically controlled. And in 2026, the country that understood that distinction walked out with a better deal without writing a single check, without pledging a single barrel of oil as formal collateral, without committing a single ton of potash or a single kilogram of uranium to American control. That is what $550 billion could not buy. And that is what Canada understood that Japan did not.